The sight of these astonishingly old and large trees just floating serenely along the coast of the Black Sea that's a vision I will never forget.
I want to talk about the 2021 movie Taming the Garden by Salome Jashvi for two reasons. One is the movie itself, which is really like nothing else I've seen before, and the other is its political significance, which I think hasn't been entirely evident to audiences in the West. It influenced the making of the movie, and it might be even more relevant now in 2025, with Georgia's further backsliding into an autocracy and the Georgian people fighting to bring their country back to a democratic trajectory. I'll talk about my thoughts on the movie itself, but also some of the real-life repercussions of the uprooting operation, how people talked about it, and the political background to it all that included cancelling the screenings of the movie in Georgia. As pretentious as it might sound, I honestly felt like it's the first movie I've seen where trees are the main characters. On paper it's a documentary, but it often doesn't feel like one because of how surreal and absurd some of the scenes feel. It's a movie that's quite beautiful and poetic, while also being rather indirectly political at the same time because of the subject matter. There might be spoilers ahead, but at the same time there isn't that much of a plot to the movie anyway, and once you know the backstory, you pretty much know what will happen. In the movie we follow works being done to extract and transport trees to Bidzina Ivanishvili's park from different places in Georgia. He was getting them both from people's private gardens and from the state. Ivanishvili is the richest man in Georgia and, as of this recording, still the de facto leader of the country. The dialogues are sparse, and when we hear people speaking, it's mostly negotiating or arguing with the workers, trying to make sense of the whole point of the operation, or expressing awe or grief over what's happening to the trees. I also like that you can also hear Megrelian being spoken. It's a local language spoken in the area where the extraction took place, and it might be the first time for me to hear it in a movie. I figured that out when I realized that instead of understanding every third word like with Georgian, I understood almost nothing. The highlight of the movie is definitely some of the surreal shots that follow the trees on their way. At the same time, I really liked the obviously well thought out static shots, both indoors and outdoors. The slow pacing in the shots reminded me a bit of the stark, naturalistic style of one of my favorite filmmakers, Michael Haneke. And maybe the same could be said about the philosophy of Haneke and Jashvi and an apparently uneasy attitude towards the notion of truth in filmmaking. Haneke would describe movies as 24 lies per second at the service of the truth, and often speak of filmmaking as manipulation that you either keep concealed or, more honestly, reveal to the viewer.
Le film, c'est pas la réalité. Le film, c'est un modèle de la réalité, si on veut dire ça. C'est naturellement, c'est la réalité, c'est dans sa complexité, c'est pas à rattraper. Alors, on doit choisir. Et ça, c'est le danger dans le documentaire et aussi dans les fictions. Et si on se rend compte de ça, on est peut-être un peu plus attentif à les dangers qui sont dedans. Parce que c'est aussi une manipulation, naturellement. Et si on donne au spectateur la possibilité de reconnaître toujours ça comme manipulation, c'est une question de honnêteté, je dirais.
Jashvi, in spite of being a documentalist, talks about her role as someone who presents the reality as she sees it, rather than pretending to be objective.
თავი როცა ტელევიზიაში დავიწყე მუშაობა, ხო? პირველი სიუჟეტი რომ გადავიღე, სოფელი აპროტესტებდა გაზსადენი მილის გაყვანას მათ მეზობლად. და რაღაცნაირად ეს სიუჟეტი 2 წუთში შევკარეს სოფლის მაცხოვრებლის მძიმე ამბავი და მივაწოდე მთელი ქვეყნის მოსახლეობას, რომ აი ენახა ჩემი 21 თუ 22 წლის გოგოს მიერ გაკეთებული სიუჟეტი და აი საღამოს მახსოვს რომ ძალიან განვიცადი, იმდენად განვიცადი რომ აი ტიროდი კიდევაც რომ აი ვფიქრობ რომ მე რა უფლება მაქვს რომ აი რაღაცა რეალობაში შევიდე ამ ხალხის რეალობაში და 2 წუთიანი რაღაც სიუჟეტი გამოვაცხო და ეს გავასაღო როგორც რეალობად. ეს იყო ერთ-ერთი გარდამტეხი მომენტი, როცა ვთქვი რომ აი ეს პატარა ფორმატი, რომელსაც აქვს პრეტენზია ობიექტურობაზე, ჩემთვის მიუღებელი არის და მე მირჩევნია რომ მიმუშაო უფრო ფართე ფორმატით, სადაც ბევრად უფრო ცვლად მოვყვები ამბავზე, სადაც შემიძლია თამამად ვთქვა, რომ ეს არის ჩემი ხედვა და არა მაინც რეალობა.
Jashvi spoke of intentionally limiting how much children, dogs and cows were featured in the movie.
These elements, they give more life
to the environment. They make it more common, and I didn't want to make it common. I wanted to make it more severe, so to say. You know, in a film you construct a kind of reality, so it was for me the way to not include children, also to construct the kind of world where there are no children, there are no animals, you know, like there's no this Eastern European village life, but something that is constructed in a way, or partially constructed, not totally, definitely. But anyway, yeah, there was this one scene where we had children expressing themselves, but it would have been a very different scene also.
The animals nonetheless did make their way into quite a few scenes, and I liked it when they did. It's hard to imagine a Georgian village or streets without dogs. In contrast to much of Haneke's work, the movie definitely does allow for some poetic and magical moments on top of the naturalistic imagery of nature being violated, though they're often infused with the absurdity of the image and the overwhelming pointlessness of the whole operation. How is this movie political? First of all, what sparked the idea for Jashi to make a movie about it was videos shared on social media of a tree floating on water, which went viral there and it was very widely discussed and criticized. The man behind the tree operation, Ivanishvili, seems to have been usually described in materials about the movie as a billionaire and former prime minister of Georgia, but I don't think it does justice to the power he has over the country. He's no mere oligarch. He's been a sort of shadowy head of the party that by now has been ruling Georgia for 12 years, which is called, in a truly Orwellian style, Georgian Dream. In spite of retreating into the background at various times, he is the de facto leader of Georgia, and he is the person responsible for its backsliding into the Russian sphere of influence. He made his wealth in the 90s in Russia, and his net worth is probably more than that of Donald Trump. That being the head of a developing country with 3 million people, where, according to official data from 2023, a median salary is less than $500 a month. Politico has lately described Ivanishvili as a man who bought a country. Watching the movie, the whole tree-moving operation reminded me of this subplot from a Polish satire comedy from 1980 called Miś, Teddy Bear, where the president of a football club comes up with a scheme to defraud money by constructing a giant hay teddy bear.
Powiedz mi, po co jest ten miś?
Właśnie, po co?
Otóż to, nikt nie wie po co, więc nie musisz się obawiać, że ktoś zapyta. Wiesz, co robi ten miś? On odpowiada żywotnym potrzebom całego społeczeństwa. To jest miś na skalę naszych możliwości. Ty wiesz, co my robimy tym misiem? My otwieramy oczy niedowiarkom. Patrzcie, mówimy to nasze, przez nas wykonane i to nie jest nasze ostatnie słowo. I nikt nie ma prawa się przyczepić, bo to jest miś społeczny, w oparciu o 6 instytucji, który sobie zgnije do jesieni na świeżym powietrzu. I co się wtedy zrobi?
Protokół zniszczenia.
It's a bear on a scale of our possibilities, pretty much entered the Polish language, and Poles still sometimes refer to pointless, grandiose government projects as teddy bears. Transporting the trees felt similarly absurd as this, but with some obvious differences. The tree project actually took place, and its point is not defrauding money, it's an oligarch flexing his power. To paraphrase the quote, you could say that this is a garden that shows the scale of Ivanishvili's possibilities. And the way it's depicted in the movie makes it feel even more acutely pointless, as it finishes with shots of a deserted botanical garden, with the transplanted giant trees and their branches resting sadly on supporting beams, with unnerving noises of birds around, automatic sprinklers, and the only people there being employees of the garden. It makes it seem like it is literally a closed, private garden of Ivanishvili, and he only did all that because he could. All of that destruction and work done only to realize some outlandish idea of a rich guy. But in fact, the garden, while remaining his own property, is open to public for free. Maybe the final scenes were shot before the opening, or maybe it was a conscious choice of Jashi, who apparently doesn't like calling it a public park.
სადღაც ამ შემთხვევაში მერცი ძლევა მოსილი ადამიანის პარკში, ხო? რაც უნდა თქვა, რომ საჯარო ბაღია, ის მაინც ერთ ადამიანს ეკუთვნის, ხო?
You could argue that it is something like manipulation. Apparently those who later cancelled this movie in Georgia did, though arguably calling it a public park might be one as well. The park is in Shekvetili, about an hour's drive north of Batumi in western Georgia, where Ivanishvili also has one of his mansions. So the final effect is calculated to convey the image of a good philanthropist who completed this project for the benefit of the people. It's a kind of a capitalist oligarchic continuation of a teddy bear type propaganda projects from the communist times. The benefactor being the benevolent Bidzina instead of the party, and the masses had better be grateful to this great man. And who cares if a few trees die along the way? The officials claim just one did. I'll leave how probable that is for you to judge. Apparently, after the movie was finished, Ivanishvili also attempted to replant 8 baobab trees from Kenya. Predictably, this caused controversy in Kenya, as you can see here for instance, where they also confused Georgia with the American state, because of course they did. Eventually, after an apparent ongoing back and forth between Ivanishvili's people, activists and protesters, and different Kenyan authorities, the trees made it to Georgia, but all 8 of them died. Somehow the park authorities managed to blame the opposition party for this by delaying the process through false denunciations and endless phone calls to high-ranking Kenyan officials. That's a missed opportunity for an action-packed sequel though. Maybe the one Georgian tree they had admitted to falling was the one that got to be covered by media.
ნედლი წიფელი ნატანებში მეორე საუკუნეა დგას. რას არ მოსწრებია, მაგრამ ამ ხელამუხლუ ხოებს მიწაში არა. ფესვები სულ მცირე 10 მეტრზე აქვს ჩაშვებული.
ფიქრობ, რომ აი ფესვითაც რაღაც თავისებური ზღაპრულია.
როგორ შეელიეთ ასე ზღაპრული?
აი მე რა ვქნა ქალბატონო, ვალი რომ აქ ბანკში ამ ბიჭსაც სახში რომ ყავს, იმ ბიჭსაც თბილისში რომ აქ ერთ 16, მეორეს 12, რა უყო მითხარ. რა უნდა მექნა? სამხარეს რომ დააწვა ამ ხის სიმძიმემ. და მიგე ნელ-ნელა შვავდებოდა ბიჭო. ვეუბნებოდი ბიჭო დააბით იმაზე, ტროსებიც ჰქონდა ყველაფერი დააბით მეორე ხეზე, მაგრამ არ გეიგონეს და რა ვიცი, ნელ-ნელა დააწვა ჩემი თვალის წინ. აი ეს ბავშვია, ხე რო წაიქცა, გაიგე ტიროდა თურმე. უთხარიო ბაბუ, ბიძინას უთხარიო მოხსნას, მაგინი ყველაო. ავშემე რა თქმა უნდა და გეოლოგები ჩამოვაკიდეო და გააკეთებენ და რა ვიცი, აბა მეტი არაფერი არ ვიცი და
That tree blocked the local road for a day and parts of it fell into someone's garden. Elsewhere, power lines and railway cables were taken down and other trees were cut along a road to make way for the one being transported. Roads were being temporarily closed, including the highway between Kobuleti and Batumi. A local news website, Batumelebi, has a tag just for Ivanishvili's trees with dozens of reports on the process. In one place, houses were flooded in the area where trees were being dug. Someone else's house was cracking due to heavy machinery operating in the area. Elsewhere, a tree got stuck and blocked the road. Here's a cow that got stuck in the mud left after the excavating of a tree next to a church. They also collected satellite photos showing some of the areas before and soon after the excavation. And the tree that was the first to be transported by sea and that initially went viral also probably died, as it disappeared from the entrance of the park where it used to stand. I find it odd that one of the arguments for the project being beneficial is that roads were being built where they worked on the trees. It was also depicted in the movie, and I think it's not like they did it as a good deed for the people. It's as if they don't see how it shows that they built some roads in order to transport the trees, but they didn't and don't care about building it for the actual people who live there. It really is a problem in Georgia and not only in rural areas. On top of the whole propaganda aspect, though, there are rumors that Ivanishvili collects the trees for some magical life-prolonging powers, or that he feeds off their energy. I can't tell how much of it is his actual beliefs and how much is made up, though I do feel that when it comes to accepting aging, narcissists tend to alternate between denial and deep dread. So if you give one almost unlimited power, they might just give magic a shot. Coming back to the movie, in general, the way people felt about talking about Ivanishvili and the reaction to the movie itself is quite reminiscent of the way criticism of the party used to be dealt with in the Eastern Bloc. The lack of a plot or a deeper exploration of particular characters felt intentional to me, as if meaning to foreground the fauna as the main characters. But creative choices aside, the creators apparently ended up ditching some of the storylines because of the people's anxieties over being featured in the movie, and many didn't want to be on camera. In the thanks section of the credits, you can see that some of the involved people decided to remain anonymous, which can give you a hint how uncomfortable being involved in it was for some people. An article at eurasia.net about the opening of the garden features some quotes from a family, which reflect a lot of what is said in the movie and what it represents. The reporters stumble upon a family in the park who is looking for the tree they sold. The father didn't say what village they're from and decided to stay anonymous because he feared jeopardizing the terms of the agreement he had signed with Ivanishvili's people. My great-grandfather planted that magnolia and I sold it for cash. What kind of a man am I after this? Gotcha asked with a guilty smile. But I did it for them, to buy them clothes and textbooks, he added, pointing at his kids. I had to fix the roof and she wanted a new laundry machine, he said, pointing at his wife. As always, everything is my fault, the wife retorted. If you keep on blabbering, they will take it all back and we won't have the money or the tree. I felt like I sold a family member, he said. Many other people were in a similar situation, in a sense being forced to give up their dignity for financial help because of a difficult financial standing, loans they had to repay, books they had to buy for their kids. Jashi highlighted in an interview how powerless some of the people felt next to the oligarchs' men, especially the older ones.
იცი რა, ეს ხალხი იყო გამოუვალ მდგომარეობაში რაღაც მხრივ. ან ერთხელ მახსოვს ერთმა ქალმა მითხრა, რომ მე ვინ ვარო იმასთან შედარებით, ანუ მე რისი უფლება მაქვს, რა თქმა უნდა, მე ანუ იგულისხმება მე დავთმობ ჩემს ხეს, მე არ მაქვს უფლება რომ შევეწინააღმდეგო, ანუ
This maybe reflects the old Soviet mentality where it was just pointless and dangerous to criticize the people in power. And eventually many people seemingly internalized this Stockholm syndrome-like belief that if they cannot be criticized, it's better to believe they can do no wrong and anything they do can be justified. Though at the same time, a regular person probably really doesn't stand much chance going against such powerful people in a crooked system anyway. On top of that, there is seemingly the newer capitalistic belief that whatever Ivanishvili did was justifiable simply by virtue of him being able to afford it.
ეკოლოგები ამბობენ, მაგრამ დაადასტურონ. რაღაცა ხომ უნდა დადვან საბუთი, რომ ამის გამო ეს ფუჭდება. მაგინი ბევრი რამეს ამბობენ. სხვა ფუჭდება ეგერ, მაგრამ ეკოლოგები რამეს არ ამბობენ, ხო? რას გავს ეს პლაჟი? ამას ვერ ხედავს ეკოლოგი. თუ აქ ადამიანს საშუალება გააკეთოს, რატო არ შეიძლება?
რა და ბოლო-ბოლო ეს ხეები ვის რას უშლის?
მაგი არ ჩენი საქმე და არც ჩენი.
ზარკეთება და რა ვიცი.
არ ჩენი საქმე.
მაგალითად ხეების დანაგვისს ნოქთა რასამისთან ქაშენ და გვაყდა და ხეები და სულ თქვა გვიჭირს. მაგნაირ ამბობენ.
პირიქით ბიჭო, კაცი უღრანი ტყიდან გადამილ ხეებზე, კაროჩე, რატომ ის გზებს აკეთებს ახლა მართლა უმადური უნდა იყო. რაც არ უნდა ხვარი იყოს, კაროჩე და რაც არ უნდა ბევრი რამე შეშლებოდეს, აკეთებს ბიჭო ახლა შენ და შენ უნდა იყო უმადური მართლა რომ აყოლილი ამ ხებრე ხალხს. გესმის?
박 사장님, 오늘도 절 먹여주시고 재워주시고 Respect!
For the people speaking about trees meant basically speaking about him and speaking about politics. And for them, for the villagers, it was extremely uncomfortable to express. So we had real trouble accessing, not accessing, but like making people understand that we're not a politically biased crew, that it is not directly a political film, even if finally it's the trees that speak about politics, however paradoxical that might be. But yeah, I can say that this was the biggest challenge and also the biggest revelation of what is happening in the country, how people are actually reluctant to express themselves, even about trees. I realized that we still live in an extremely fragile democracy. We inherited this Soviet culture, so to say, where you should not speak badly about a person who's above you in hierarchy. And this is what we have still right now. I mean, there were many people who would just say, who am I to resist to him? Or who am I to speak of him? And he was mentioned as him, even without a name very often. That they're not free to express, they're not free in their minds, I think.
ეზოში იყო დაათვალიერა ეს უბრალოდ ხეს უყურებდა მეტი არაფერი. არაფერი ჩაიძინა დავიდა. არც მასაუბრება და არავის არ ამბობდა.
I agree that the movie itself is not a direct criticism of you-know-who or the government. The dialogues themselves are quite sparse. Some do criticize Ivanishvili, but some of them defend his right to do what he did. It seems a balanced reflection of what people might say in this situation, and Jashi could have focused on the people who were the most distressed by it. Nonetheless, what was shown in the movie probably turned out to be too uncomfortable for Ivanishvili, who seemingly cancelled its screenings in Georgia through a then newly chosen director of Georgian Film Academy because it created political divisions in the public. It was mostly only showed in small venues. It seems that around 2021, the year the movie came out, Ivanishvili started to be more controlling of cultural institutions, with the appointment of a new culture minister, Teat Tsulukiani, still in office as of early 2025, who reorganized institutions and replaced multiple competent people with party cronies. Among others, firing Gaga Chkheidze, the director of National Film Center, which partially funded the movie. Both him and Jashi believed Tsulukiani led to the movie's cancellation, with the director saying that she had never experienced such a blatant case of censorship until Tsulukiani became the minister. Thus, the release of the movie in Georgia also got caught up in the deterioration of public institutions, with the same state that partly financed the movie actively suppressing its screenings after the release. If you have any interest in Georgia, you will know that the political situation has been progressively getting worse since then up until now. When I'm making this video in early 2025, we have by this point illegitimate government of Ivanishvili blatantly rigging the elections and going completely against the will of Georgians to integrate with Europe. What it is not a sudden 180 in their politics, but a culmination of many years of increasing authoritarianism and a drift towards Russia and Russian-type governance. The story of this one movie, both the movie itself as well as the circumstances around it, give us a glimpse into how all this has been taking place. During the latest wave of protests since late 2024, hundreds of people were arrested, assaulted or tortured by the police or unidentified masked men in the streets. That number includes protesters, opposition politicians and journalists, male and female, some of them assaulted live while covering protests or assaults happening elsewhere. While I was working on this video, maciejamatejko, a co-founder and director of Batumelebi, which I've quoted extensively here, was arrested on a charge of assaulting a policeman. As of this recording, she has been on hunger strike in prison for 18 days. I wish all the best to Georgians in their fight for their country, and I hope what Taming the Garden represents will eventually only remind people of absurdities of a gun era, rather than remain a reality.